Hi, are you perhaps a TEFL teacher wanting to break out into the EAP world of teaching? Are you perhaps working in a different area and you really want to get into academic English in a university setting? Then these videos are here to give you some tips and tricks to make EAP fun, because we all know that sometimes academic English in the classroom can be quite dry. So I'd like to give you some warmers today. My first activity that I'd like to give to you to get students to kind of have a nice working environment with each other, and also for you as a teacher, is it's really crucial to get to know their names. So a really nice way of doing it is just simply to bring in some card or some paper, ask students to fold the A4 in half, and then for them to write their name on the right hand side, and then also an adjective that describes them with the same first letter. So if my name were Joe, perhaps I could be Jolly Joe. Or if it were Peter, perhaps I could be Powerful Peter or Pretty Peter, or however you like. So students can place these cards in front of them, and then you'll find that as the teacher, you'll get to know their names better. But also what you might find is that actually you forget their full name and you call them by their adjective, but it actually does create a very nice working environment. Secondly, I'd like to give you a really nice warmer with a little bit of drawing involved. So you can ask students, well, I'll be the teacher for this, you the student. So you can ask students to draw 5 circles on a piece of paper. A sort of psychological test, but the circles need to be big enough that you can fit a one-word answer or a small picture into the circle. So you ask a series of 5 questions. So my first question is, if you were on death row and I were to grant you 1 meal, and if I'm generous, a drink too, what would you choose? Either write it or draw it in the circle. Secondly, if you think about someone that inspires you, who would it be? Would it be a family member? Would it be someone in your research area, someone on television, for example? Just write the word or draw a small picture of that person. Thirdly, if I were to give you a ticket to either somewhere in your country or somewhere you've been to in the world, where would you choose to go back to? Fourthly, if you were to summarize your last year, in 1 word or a small picture, what would you choose? Put it into your circle. Fifth, I'd like you to now close your eyes. Are you sure your eyes are closed? So, I'd like you to imagine that it's 10 years from now. You get out of bed, your feet touch the floor, you pad over to the bathroom and you look in the mirror. Who is staring back at you? What are you doing? Where are you? What type of work are you doing? Are you living with others or are you living by yourself? Do you perhaps have animals around you? You could write more than 1 word for this last circle or more than 1 picture and then fill it in. My advice is that you then get students to discuss in small groups, maybe 2s or 3s, so yeah, pairs, and then you feed back as a whole class for the activity. And what's really nice is this, it actually gets some kind of discussion going, because if a student says, for example, they'd like to go back to Turkey, perhaps you have a Turkish student and there might be some chat about Istanbul or Ankara. If, for example, you talk about a famous person, maybe the class knows the famous person. As I get older, I start to not always know the famous person. The students would have had, pretty tough times getting on some of these courses. It's quite challenging to get onto some of these university programs. So their word, which they might have chosen, could be something emotional, right? To describe their year from last year. Perhaps they've had to take the IELTS, lots of times. Perhaps it's been a tough time. So getting them to elaborate a little bit is nice, and you'll find that others interact on that one. Yeah, and also with the 10 years from now, it's interesting. It's like talking about what they're going to do once they've completed their studies, like a goal. So, yeah, so that always gets really nice discussion. And if someone's not sure, then you can talk about their life right now, and that's okay. But what you kind of want are these ideas bouncing from each side of the classroom. So that's a really nice activity. And then the other one you can do is just to simply, from the cards that students have got placed in front of them with their name and adjective, is just start to ask them a few different questions. Now, don't go 1, 1, 1, 1, because they're going to predict the answer. They're going to be waiting, but you kind of choose at random. Make sure that you ask different questions, and not just, are you living in a city where we're studying? You change it up a bit to ask some questions. And if they start to talk about their home country, then you ask more questions. So it's like this kind of, approach from question to question. And that way the students know a little bit about each other as you start to learn and start to do the lessons together. And I really think that it's crucial in these academic settings that because they're going to be working with each other, they're doing feedback online and in face-to-face, that you have to get a good working rapport between them. Otherwise, you will not get your learning goals. So I hope I've given you some nice ideas on how to have some warmers and improve the atmosphere in your classroom.